Make sure. Oh, look, it's backwards. I love that. Okay. All right. So today we're going to be starting more information about the 1066 to 1485, which is considered to be the medieval time period or Middle Ages. We call it Middle Ages because of multiple reasons, and part of it was kind of a misnomer during earlier literature explorations because they didn't think there was a whole lot of stuff that was really written that was particularly literature. Nowadays, they've discovered a whole lot more. Sir Gawain the Green Knight, some of the other famous, obviously Chaucer, but that was towards the end of the age, if you want to call it that. It was closer to the end of the 1300s. But there's also been multiple discoveries in people's attics, trunks, etc., of different manuscripts of stuff that was much older than they had originally thought. So if you watch this video here about the Battle of Hastings and then the oversimplified Battle of Hastings as well as oversimplified changes to language, it's why it's on there to kind of make it and reiterate the whole idea of us going from Old English to Middle English and some of the massive shifts that had happened when you have two languages colliding, and one is of the lower class, more the working class, the defeated peoples, if you want to call it that, the taken over people when there's a new Anglo-Norman language that comes along. This is in your reading in the book. If you do your reading in the book, it's not like I'm coming up with new information. I'm just kind of telling you and summarizing for you what you should have already read. That's the part of reading your book that's so important. Now, one of the things that we always get to is the idea of chivalry. This is for a different class, guys. This is for the class that I'm actually filming this for. And this is assignments for the Chaucer Tales. Right, I've already sent you guys your Chaucer Tales things, and boy, this is going to be bad. I cannot stand this light in my face. But one of the things that you have to really know during this time period is that there are two major ruling parties and kind of in opposition to each other. You have what's called your secular side, and that would be like the king, the overlord, the knights, the what's considered to be a administration that's not dealing with the church. But you also have an entire court system through the church as well. Thus, when you start reading Canterbury Tales, you'll understand why there's a conflict between some of the major people that are profiled, if you want to call it that, are part of the estate essay in your Canterbury Tales. But that's towards the end of the system. Before we get to there, we have to understand the chivalric feudal type system. And we know what chivalry is. You're welcome to look it up. I mean, you can look it up pretty easily. But chivalry is the system of allegiances, is probably the easiest way to what they would swear to as a knight who earned their spurs. And there's a whole system of knighthood, and the simplified version is you go from being a page in someone's household, meaning that you're fostering somebody else, quite often, sometimes political prisoners, okay? Sometimes they're just someone that owes you fealty. That means to swear fidelity to something. And you would have two different ways to get major power during this time period. One of those would be to be a landed lord, who the further up the system you go, the more land and knights that you had at your disposal. If you ever played the game Settlers, anyone familiar with that game? Okay, or anyway, you should play it sometime. It has to do about allocation of resources and who has the power because you have control of different resources. And this is very much like the feudal system because it was an agriculturally based system. So if you had a castle, their job was to protect the people who were feeding it. And it was kind of this exchange between they protect you so you can work your fields, but they also require you to give them food for that protection. Okay, very simplistic idea in a lot of ways. And it gets much more complicated from there when you get into court politics and you get into rankings and all this other stuff. But you also had this domination of the church, of the Catholic Church, and you would have the ecclesiastical side of chivalry. That means what you swear when you have allegiance to the church. And so there's two major codes of chivalry one has to do with the secular side, which is right here, and ecclesiastical. Your secular side is going to be your swearing overall the allegiance to the king. Even if you're swearing to one of his vassals, you're swearing to like a lowly, not even landed knight, and that just means they own land. They have some type of land they're controlling. The ultimate allegiance you have is to the king and to the king's orders. Then you would have the loyalty to that king, being courteous, and your vow to the Lord. You're supposed to be, that means you're overlord. You're good at fighting, and you're supposed to treat ladies with, and this is specific to ladies, with gentility, with great respect, to woo them. And there's a whole step of wooing a lady. And this is your basic ideas that are going to be in your chivalric secular code. Now, on the other side, you have a chivalric code. That's an ecclesiastical one, what you basically swear to the Catholic Church during this time period. And this one is going to start with the loyalty to the church. And at the head of the Catholic Church is whom? The Pope. Okay, that's the top guy. Not that you'd ever meet him or you'd ever, any of that stuff. He's in Rome most of the time, unless it's like 1200s and they decide to split the papacy, but that's a totally different story. Okay, ask France about that. So it became a very political office. Popes, powerful archbishops, etc. You would also have your allegiance to the church. You're supposed to tell the truth, which can get in conflict with wooing a lady, right? Okay, just saying. All right. Being honorable at all times, vow to God, no vices, and obviously when you're talking about the truth as the idea of, it should be a capital T actually, not a lower t, meaning that your allegiance is to what the church tells you God wants of you, because that's what the Catholic Church did. They had church doctrine. Nowadays, because of the Reformation, we have an idea of the ultimate authority on the earth for the church to be either the person of Jesus Christ for Christianity or the Bible, one or the other. Whereas in the Catholic tradition, the ultimate authority on earth is the Pope and whatever the Pope decrees. So this is the Catholic Church. There's not been a call for reforming. That's what the Reformation was. It wasn't a call to split from the Catholic Church. The person who actually posted the 95 Theses wanted the church to like revamp itself and to go back to, hey, you might want to look at the Bible again because we've gotten way offline in, about 1,000 years of misdoctrine here. And we keep doing more doctrine based upon the misdoctrine, and we never go back to the original source. It's like playing a very long game of complicated telephone. Okay, if I whisper something in somebody's ear and they whisper it to somebody else and they whisper it to somebody else, you don't ever go back to the original source, which would be me who whispered it to begin with. You're not checking it. So there's all kinds of mistakes that can end up. Anyone ever play the game telephone? What I'm talking about? Okay, so you can imagine how funny it gets at the very end, especially if someone can't hear well, or they misspeak, or someone has a very interesting accent, or there's something that goes wrong in here. And this is kind of what happened over 1,000 years of Catholic doctrine by the time you get to the Middle Ages. So one of the major genres of this time period is the romance, is what it's called, chivalric romance. And of course, it's going to explore the major ideas of chivalry. So when you get to the Canterbury Tales, the major chivalric romance is presented in that is the Knight's Tale. Who has the Knight's Tale in here? Okay, group one. Yeah, you have Knight's Tale there. I couldn't see over the computer. So it's a chivalric romance. So we're going to have to talk about what do I mean by chivalric romance? What qualities should it have? Basic qualities that are going to identify it as a chivalric romance. It's also going to be written in poetry. Most of the time, you're still doing poetry because people are still trying to memorize a lot of things, and poetry is great for memorization. That's kind of the purpose of all the techniques and mnemonic devices we have in poetry. You're also going to have, and this is halfway through, you guys have this as well. I've not put your assignments for who's up here on your particular one yet, because I want you guys to spend a little time today probably talking to the person a little bit more, hopefully, if they're here. These are Canterbury Tales translations. These will also be on here, and this is the Harvard site for the Canterbury Tales. And then more instructions for the assignment are on here as well. I also have a PowerPoint presentation for you guys to look at. Guys, if you are looking at stuff online, click on everything. Read everything. Your notes are literally under the week. And that's why I give these films and also talk in class and say, here, let me give you further explanations of what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, let's talk about the lessons on the genre of the medieval romance. One of the highest forms of the chivalric romance was written in a particular work called Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And that is actually part of your reading I'm asking you to do for this week, is to read the chivalric tale. And it's written by someone called the Pearl Poet. Okay, and that is pearl as in like a pearl of great price. The person is referred to as that, although he's not really anonymous. So if you Google search this, and one of my quizzes say who wrote Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, you're going to Google search it and it's going to say anonymous, but that's not true. We have a title for this person called the Pearl Poet, because the person wrote a poem that we have surviving with the manuscript of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight called The Pearl, and also one that's called Purity. So there's 3 major works that we know of by this person, so he's just called the Pearl Poet. And he, the person who wrote it, I refer to him as he because there's lots of speculation it is a male, okay, but no one knows for sure. The Pearl Poet wrote these collections as part of a church collection, if you want to call it that, because his contemplation was contemplation on scripture. That's what most of his was about. And part of the overall theme for Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is the idea of, is perfection here possible on earth? And that's what he's going to explore throughout that, as well as through his other poems as well. So we're going to go over here, and I'll probably write notes on the board. Let's talk about, if I'm talking about a medieval romance, we're going to go through the characteristics of what that would include in it. Okay, and this is online. This is online for you guys to look at. It's always good to have more explanatory notes for yourself, because when you're in the process of writing down notes, you actually learn more. It glues it into your brain. That's a physical fact, okay? I have a minor in psychology. Trust me, I've taken 18 hours of graduate work in psychology, and I can tell you some of the great learning tools that we have, and one of those is writing it down. Very simple. So first of all, of the 8 qualities, the first one is going to be, this is not going to be a tale of an adventure of a family. Okay, this is going to be adventures of knights and ladies and the upper class, kings and queens, not ordinary people. Quite different from Anglo-Saxon in some ways, because Anglo-Saxon would tell jokes about people, and they might talk about the common wanderer, etc. You didn't have to be of a particular class to get a story written about him. But this is also a time, a feudal time, so the people who are paying you money to write these things are either the church, okay, and a lot of the higher ups in the church at this point would have been second or third sons of noble houses all across Europe, because that's what they did. They wanted power, secular power. You'd have your heir, and you might have 2 or 3 more sons. You might have 4 or 5 more sons, and some of them are sent to the church for education, because part of being a knight, you didn't necessarily have to read. Okay? It was not necessary for you to rule this. That's why you had stewards. Stewards were there who would often come from the church, and they would maybe do your accounting and make sure that the stuff at home was taken care of while you might be out fighting, because that was your role. Your role was to fight and defend things. You're like a walking cannon. That's your job, okay? You're even dressed as one. Think about the armor. And it's also going to be talking about the code of chivalry. Okay, always. That's why it's called a chivalric romance. Its focus is on the code of chivalry, which I've just shown to you in a very basic form. Another one is this is idealized settings. Yeah, if it's a forest, it's going to be a forest, and it doesn't have like fleas in it, it doesn't have ticks, and it doesn't have like real world stuff. It's idealized. And you're going to have an idealized perfect castle, and you'll have an idealized perfect garden. Whatever it is, it's very ideal, the highest of it. Another part of this is you're often going to have very mysterious, supernatural type of intervention or events that happen. Sometimes it's magic. Sometimes it might be, if it's a Arthurian romance, meaning based upon the tales of King Arthur, it's going to have like Camelot, and you might have some Morgana Le Fay, you might have wizards, etc. You'll have Merlin, and we still have part of this tradition to this day. If you've watched The Sword and the Stone, the Disney one, okay, that actually comes from a much longer book called The Once and Future King. That was written by T.H. White, and it's the first section of it. It's worth it to read. It was written in the 1930s, 40s, and it was a protest against Hitler. Okay, and the whole point of it was might does not make right. Then you have unusually brave, noble, honorable heroes and heroines sometimes, who sometimes have the use of magic or extraordinary powers. Just part of what or who they are. Sometimes they're like, especially in a Christian romance, they would have a Christian romance, then whoever it was, like Patient Griselda, was like, I mean, her name was Constance. That was her name, okay? If you're doing the Man of Law's Tale, her name is Constance. I don't think I assigned it this time, but that means her job was to stay constant. That was it. She has no character. She's basically an allegorical figure. Most of these people in these Arthurian romances are like allegorical figures. That means that if they're supposed to be patient, they stay patient. And if they're supposed to be Mr. Chivalry, they're Mr. Chivalry. If they're Mr. Dudley Do-Right, that's what they are. Okay, you guys, yeah, you didn't grow up watching Dudley Do-Right. Watch it's a cartoon about a Canadian Mountie. It's hilariously funny, and his goal and everything is to do right. That's why he's called Dudley Do-Right. Leads to very funny situations for him because they're always trying to set him up. So you also have occasional disguise as an ordinary or lowly person. So you can't disguise yourself as a lowly person if you're a lowly person to begin with, okay? You have to be somebody of a different class. And so part of this is the idea that you can't be seen, that some way you can become a lower person or a more lower class and no one's going to pay attention to you. And that's very true to this time period. The hero is, or heroine is often motivated by a strong love. Often this love attachment is to some idealized person. Like when you're doing The Knight's Tale, two knights look out the window and see this beautiful lady and instantly fall in love. Now, Cupid had something to do with it because obviously this is a supernatural tale. They both got like hit with the arrow from Cupid at the same time. So it's this whole idea of love at first sight, that you have found your soulmate. Then you're also going to have a battle. And you're going to have a definite force of evil versus a force of good. But sometimes you might have battles of people who it's not very clear one's good and one's evil. Sometimes they're just in contest for the same thing. And that also happens in The Knight's Tale from Chaucer, which is a later tale. Whereas in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, there's a definite good and a definite bad or evil, if you want to call it. Then it's also going to talk about the code of chivalry, loyalty to one's king and to God, bravery, courage, skill in warfare, ease in social graces such as conversation, singing, writing, etc. Respect and honor for women. Now, it should say for ladies, because there's a definite distinguishing between two different sides of chivalry as far as your code. There's two classifications of women. This is medieval time period. So the big question during this medieval time period was, do women have souls? Okay, I can't make it up. This was a church document type of thing having to do with the Catholic Church, and it's, we can treat women as property as long as they don't have souls. Yes?
What I don't understand is that isn't this kind of superimposing Like, even though you said that the church was changing what was deemed to be like the core aspirations of Anglo-Saxon society, how come there wasn't more pushback, or like, because reverence for women is not the same, or it's not tied to godliness the same way?
Because that's an old Anglo-Saxon. We're in medieval time periods now.
So
So now we bring this over with the Normans, we bring the feudal system, we bring this whole idea of very Catholic doctrine. You can look it up. There's all kinds of Catholic doctrine during this time period from like 800 AD to 1500, debating whether women have souls. And the whole argument was because Eve gave Adam the whatever fruit it was. And because of her, sin comes into the world. So she's obviously an instrument of Satan. That was the basic argument. I don't make this up. I'm just telling you. Yes.
Another question. This also adds to what in Beowulf we already saw that. What is that? I can't remember her name, but she was offering, or she was also part of the titles. How come they're only considering biblical scripture, not like present, past, before, when it comes to argument? Or is that just like an abbreviation you get? Does that make sense?
I'm not sure what your. Does anyone know what his question
Do
is?
they still have Beowulf and all the other literature during this time still?
No, not really. You have to realize that this is something that has been, when you have the dissolution of that society because someone's come in and killed all your great leaders or replaced them at this point, then at this point you're not going to be retelling the tales that are of a past society and its values. Okay. You're going to come in and you're going to retell this information. Now, this is not an immediate process. This is a gradual process. What I'm saying is that this happens over a 200-year period, but you have to realize the power of the Catholic Church during this time period is basic teachings of the church is that to be excommunicated from the church means that you're going to hell, period. No hope for you whatsoever. The basic priest at the lowest level has the power, in theory, to excommunicate whoever displeases or is in opposition to the church. Even if it's a king, it doesn't matter because this is great chain of being, this whole power thing. Now, does this happen in real life? Not so much. I mean, he'd be beheaded by the king. Oops, we don't know what happened to your little priest, okay? But this is part of the power play. And so then to be in opposition to the church and its teachings means to be in opposition to God and the king, because the king is the divine representative of God here on earth. Yeah, which is very different than Anglo-Saxon. Okay, because there's not that claim, I'm here as a Godhead. I'm not here by the divine right of kings. That is the absolute teaching. It's still very permeating in European society to a great degree, that you have your betters. You have those people who are above you. And it's a very classified society. It's not nearly as bad as it used to be. That's kind of like why the French had to like totally behead the king when they did the whole revolutionary thing. Okay, because you couldn't have any representative. You couldn't have anyone for people to get behind and fight for, because they wanted this kingship back. They wanted the power structure back that kept them in power. Okay, read Machiavelli. I'm just going to tell you. Okay, The Prince. It'll tell you absolute power corrupts absolutely. How do you solidify power? You make sure the people believe that your power is totally legitimate, and you legitimize it by some type of Godhead claim. Okay, I don't make it up. Okay, now we do it by moral claim. Okay, we do it or political claim.
I found that interesting. I just wanted more specification. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm just trying to say, hey, this is the whole power sign. So if you do your reading in the Norton book, that's part of the beauty of having Norton, but it does explain this massive shift in society, this imposition of a totally new way, in some ways, of thinking, but not totally new, because when you do have leaders and they continue to have hereditary handing it down, not to the best person, but to whoever the son happens to be, that's how you end up with people like Prince John and the Magna Carta. Okay? And that whole pesky thing that leads to the American Declaration of Independence. I mean, I'm not kidding. It's always that power. Okay, what are we after? And so it was easier to have women who didn't have any claim to any rights whatsoever, because then you could barter them away, or they could just disappear because you had the right to beat your wife. You had the right to kill your wife if she was in defiance of whatever it was, because she was your property. As soon as you married her, she was your property. And there was pretty much only marriage, because otherwise it's called a Madonna whore complex that they really had. And either you were, if you were not Madonna, chaste, pure wife material, because remember, chastity is the most important thing, because you want to have your own person, your own son sitting on whatever noble throne you have. So that's what your bartering chip was as a woman. So I'm just telling you what it was, okay? And other than that, you can become a member of the oldest profession. She's like, oh yeah, sound like about right, yeah. So, but then there's all these nuances in between, and that's part of what Chaucer explores. Okay, that's why the wife of Bath was such a hard character for medieval people, but they realized this is really a real person here. This is not our social construct or our idealized construct. Okay. So, and I'll be open now too. Is that not open on here? Okay. And I do have a PowerPoint for the Chaucer project on here too. I'm not sure it's on yours though, but I'm going to tell you that you do want to look at pretty much everything on here, because we're trying to do two things at the same time. That's why I don't want it hidden. I don't even know why it's hidden. Okay. And that's why I have to check these things on a regular basis. All right. So if you have this power structure and you have this whole idea of purity as being a commodity, because that's what it did become, not for men, I'm talking about for women. Okay. And the higher your social class, the more value there was placed on that. In some ways, it was better just to be like a middle class, not even call it middle class, you're not really middle class, a lower class person, because then you could just do whatever you wanted to most of the time, except as long as you didn't leave the land. Now, of course, you could also starve, but the truth is that because it was an agricultural-based system, if the lords of the castle were not protecting the people who were working the fields and plying the trades and doing these other systems, then everybody starved together, because there was just no food. If there was a drought, you starved together. They might have more money for a little more food a little longer than you did, but if there's no food available, nobody's buying it. Okay. So that's why it was a very intricate system between the lords of the land and the other ones. But that's also why there were so many rules about hunting. You could not hunt on the king's land. You could not hunt on the overlord's land, because then you could survive. Okay, and so you wanted to keep the deer, the whatever it was for you. But you have to realize that England during this time period is still pretty much especially Wales, is a very wild place. There's a lot of open land. There's still lions and tigers and bears on not really lions, but you still have all kinds of wildlife, wild animals, etc. And it's not nearly, especially after the Black Death, okay, nearly as populated as, say, it is now. Now, the other thing, there's several things that happened during this time period that also changed all of Europe, and that's called, one of those is the Black Death. Anyone familiar with the Black Death, bubonic plague? Okay, yeah. There's speculation it killed 40 to 50% of the population of Europe in 200 to 250 years. That is a massive change in any society, and thus it kind of helps to break the back of the feudal system, because now you have to find laborers to work the land, and you have to start paying them, because yours are all dead. Okay, I mean, can't make it up. And the further south in England you were, the bigger the impact was on England. England was not as badly off as far as the bubonic plague as like Southern Europe was. Okay. And a lot of that has to do with the trade routes. Plus, England's cold. And if something's spread by fleas, and you have a harsh winter, what happens to fleas? They die off. Okay. So the further north you are, the less likely you were to die of the plague. But there's not really any definite how many people died, because like whole villages were wiped out and no one made it out alive. So again, especially in France, Spain, Italy, there was just whole places that were just decimated. They were just gone. To this day, they still don't have accurate numbers for it, and probably never will. All right. So this is your PowerPoint for your Chaucer project. It should be on there. If it's not, let me know. I also tried to put on these Riverside Chaucer pages for research. This is where I took pictures of the Chaucer pages, etc., and they should be on there too. But do, because you guys see me in person, come to my office and take those pictures yourself, because you might be able to read them a lot better. Okay, and so, but these should be on here too. And let me know if there's any problems looking at these as well. All right, so when we start with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, especially, there's other things that are happening during this time period as well that are going to make a huge impact on what we know of as modern Europe, or as what becomes modern Europe. Let's go to this one. We're going to go into a new window. All right. Yeah. Okay. Oh, great. Okay, guys, sorry. It's going to be offline tomorrow. Great, perfect. Okay. Okay, so this is the Middle Ages information period, because we already started with part of this introduction. And Middle Ages is really beginning of Norman conquest, and then we go to 1485, where we have the printing press, and one of the first books printed in England. And you also have when you Henry VII solidifies his Tudor reign, if you want to call it that. So that's what part of these notes to talk about. Middle English is going to tell you about that. Norwegian Celtic. After Norman conquest, English was suppressed socially from elite society, institutionally from parliament and law courts. Okay, so the whole idea of Old English and its traditions, etc., surviving, it's actively suppressed. In other words, they're not going to publish things with it. They're not going to be writing things in the church courts about it. It's just not going to happen. And laws are now going to be written in Anglo-Norman or in Latin. Okay. It talks about the Roman Catholic Church and how it's very important during this time period. But the language that the Bible is written in medieval Europe is Latin.
Only priests can read Latin.
And most of them couldn't even read it either. They just got to memorize it. That's what they did. For most of the stuff that they would do in church, they would not even know what it was. They just memorized it. Okay. So that does kill a lot of learning. Just letting you know that. And then we'll talk about the ending of it. And it says only a small proportion of medieval English books survived. Large numbers were destroyed at the time of the destruction of the monasteries and libraries in the 1530s. Okay, so we have lost a whole lot of information. And text of Old English, Anglo-Norman, Middle Welsh, and Irish, early Middle English, and most difficult texts in later Middle English, like Sir Gawain the Green Knight, Piers Plowman, are here translated. Chaucer and other Middle English works may also be read in the original. Okay. And I'll talk about the grammar as well. Okay. And this starts with the whole idea of Britannia, different periods of Anglo-Saxons, how they went through. And this obviously gives you part of the notes that we went over, but we're going to talk about the poetic diction as well. Let's go to, okay. And the literature of the 12th and 13th century is what we consider to be the height of the Norman literary period, especially after the decisive battle of Hastings, which we have notes about as well. Interestingly enough, this is also going to be the birthplace of what we consider to be drama. This is the medieval drama is the area from which we get later on Shakespeare. Okay, and he is not far removed from the mystery, miracle, morality plays that developed during the Middle Ages. In fact, a lot of his techniques, a lot of the things that he does in his plays would be familiar with his audience because of the tradition of these are called liturgical plays most of the time. Yeah. So, I love the fact that they say 14th century war and disease were prevalent throughout the Middle Ages. Yes, a lot of people die. If you ever heard of the 100 Years' War, okay, that's during this time period as well. And it talks about the war against France and the whole tradition of how many people are dying, and then little survival of this time period. So you have Chaucer, etc., but you also have Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, the finest of all English romances. I'll tell you that. The plot of it involves a folklore motif of a challenge by a supernatural visitor, first found in an old Irish tale. So it does have inspiration in some of the earlier ones, but it's very medieval in its construct and in the thematic exploration of the code of chivalry. And it's going to be Arthurian legend, and we're going to talk about how it begins and how it ends and some of the techniques that he uses during this time period. Okay, so let me get to, and I do suggest that you read the pages I've asked you to read. Most of the stuff that I'm going over is sitting right there. Okay, so we're going to start with Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Okay. Oh, it didn't do it, did it? Okay, let's try again. Sir Gawain and the Green. Okay. The other thing to know is that you do have a tradition from Marie de France that was part of what became the medieval chivalric romance. I mean, that's part of, and that would be a translation, because it was originally written in Middle French, I guess you might call it that. Okay, let's go to this. And mystery plays, these are going to be in here as well. William Langland is a very important person because of the Piers Plowman. The entire thing of Piers Plowman is a allegory that is also a satire of the abuses of the Catholic Church. That's what it's for. And we're going to talk about what allegory is. Okay, so Gawain and the Green Knight, these are information that's going to tell you about it, tell you about the poet itself, and it's written in forfeits, as you call it. They'd be sections, and it is going to be very indicative of medieval art. If you know anything about medieval art, number one, it's going to be iconographic. What do I mean by iconographic? Yes, you're going to have pictures that represent very specific qualities. You'll have a picture, there's a certain face that would be there that would be lust. Okay, and it's always iconographic of lust. You would have certain names, such as the name Allison during the medieval time period was indicative of somebody being a woman of loose morals. That was just the name that they used. I don't know why. Okay, that's what it was. And say, for example, if you had a gap in your front teeth, that was indicative of you being lustful. Okay. And so there's iconography. If you have a certain picture of a lady and she has this golden crown around her head and she's holding an infant, this is going to be iconographic of whom? Mary. Okay, so these are iconographic ones because most people couldn't read. So what you had was basically picture symbols that everyone understood to mean whatever it was that you were trying to convey. The second thing is medieval art is very balanced. So if you have one thing on this side, you're going to have something on this side, and it's going to often be flat. It's not going to be like 3D representations of things. That is not until we get to the Renaissance that there's more landscapes or different things that are going to be set up as actual, like almost like pictures that you would take of stuff. This is going to be very iconographic, and there's going to be symbols, and you're going to have paintings. And most of the paintings that are going to be happening during the medieval time period are going to be church stuff. Or you're going to have stained glasses in churches because they're the ones who had the money to pay artists to do these things. That simple. Every once in a while, you might have a family portrait of a noble as well, but that was not nearly as popular at the beginning of this time period as it became later on. We have miniatures and portraits and things like that as well. But as far as like the great works of art, like the glass for the Canterbury Cathedral, this is something that might have been worked on for 200 years by the same family as part of what they did for their service to the Catholic Church. So, yes?
How close was the peasantry to their nobles?
It depended. The further out in the country you were, the more that line blurred in some ways. I mean, just because you all had to survive together. I mean, but if you're in London, there's a very, very classified society. You know, you have the king, and you have, you know, his court nobles, and you have the favorites, and you have the queen, and you have the whole ladies in waiting, and all this other very stratified system. Whereas if you're on an estate and you only have, you know, say 50 peasants, and you all grew up together, and, you know, nanny so-and-so was your wet nurse. Okay, that's going to be a lot, very different, much more we have to survive together. And it's still kind of that way in more of the English countryside to this day, just because that's been the tradition. Okay, so again, the further away you get from the Catholic center of power, and from the centralized like government, the kingship, the less stratified it becomes most of the time. Okay, just because of you having to survive together, because you're still like a mini village. You still have to be able to eat and work and all these other things together. Whereas like it just, you know, it depends. Okay, so, and it also depends on what you consider to be a peasant. Okay, the lines get less distinct at different times. Okay. So when you start talking about Sir Gawain the Green Knight, and this is written by the Pearl poet, it's going to have very iconographic symbols. It's going to have uses of numbers. It's going to have uses of colors. This is when we have the whole idea of heraldry. If you know that, we still use it today. Okay, what are the colors for the Miami Dolphins?
Blue, orange,
And white. Okay. What's the colors for the Steelers?
Red, blue, yellow, black, and white.
Okay, no red.
The red is in the little.
Yeah, only in that, but the actual colors are usually, it used to be always just black and gold. Okay, so what's the colors, I don't know, for UNC Chapel Hill? Okay, Carolina blue and white. What's color for Duke? Duke blue and white. Okay, so this is, we haven't really changed it much. We still have colors that represent things. We have logos that represent things. Okay, and this is the iconographic. Okay, so if I have a little check mark that looks like this, what's that supposed to be?
It's like you're approved, or it's like you sign off.
It can, or if it's a check mark or thingy that looks like this, if I can draw it.
The Nike swoosh.
Okay, there you go. Nike. We still use it. Okay, so we still have iconographic symbols that we use. Okay, if I have a logo on something that is supposed to be a pretend drink, but it's obviously red and it has this very cursive writing on it, and it's a soda, what do I assume it probably is? Coke. Okay, so we haven't changed it. They call it marketing and labeling, but it hasn't really changed that much. It's still very medieval. And so you have different colors that represent different ideas during this time period. And that's part of what we explore in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And it also has to come full circle, that whole balance thing. If you start someplace with medieval, you're going to end up someplace with medieval. It's going to come full circle because that's the whole idea of completeness. You also have some very medieval, besides the chivalric code, you have the idea of life as a journey. And in very medieval tradition, the journey is the body and soul. They're not separated as one without the other. It is a journey. Anytime that you walk someplace, it's you, and it's going to affect not only your body, but it's also going to be a journey of your soul at the same time. And the more imbalanced it is, the better your life has been. This is also a time period when you can judge a book by its cover. If it's a very, very valuable book, which most of them were because they were handwritten in hours and hours by somebody in a monastery, so they had to justify using the expensive ink and the time and the paper, so it had to be of high subject. So you might have these beautiful golden outside with jewels, etc. That would be the Bible, because what's precious as the jewel inside, you would have on the outside as well. So this is a time period when you can judge a book by its cover. You also have a time period in which most of your wealth is either going to be in land or very valuable, identifiable family jewels. Because you don't have what we know of it, and it does come during this time period, what we know as banking, like we think of it in modern terms. It does start happening about this time, but it's a gradual transition. Okay. And it also has to do with the fluidity of society. How often do you go different places? Okay. And if you have everything on your estate at home and you never go further than 2 miles away from your estate, you don't need to have a whole bunch of money in coins because you don't have to take it with you. Okay. So there's part of these reasons for some of it. And the other nice thing too about having your family jewels is that if someone steals it, why does no one steal the Hope Diamond from the Smithsonian?
They'll just find it and you'll be calling.
Because it's so identifiable, right? That you can't, and you're not going to get anyone to fence it. You're not going to get anyone to cut it. Okay. So same kind of thing during this time period is that you kept your landed wealth. You kept your monetary wealth in a lot of jewelry, jewels, etc. I'm not saying there weren't gold coins. There were. I'm just saying that it's not the fluidity that we think of as coins nowadays. All right. So when you start this, it's going to start with the siege and assault of Troy. Anyone know what Troy's from? Iliad and Odyssey, right? Okay, so Trojan War, Trojan horse, that's where it comes from. And it says, with the city of smoke, heap of cinders and ash, the traitor who contrived such betrayal there was tried for his treachery, the truest on earth. Okay, one of the first qualities of medieval poetry is it is highly alliterative. Okay, it's the Anglo-Saxons were like English, Beowulf, etc., were alliterative, but the medieval took it to like a whole new level. Okay, it's like reading Dr. Seuss. Okay, after reading something really serious, it just goes on and on. Especially, and that's why I like this translation of it, because it keeps that tradition alive. Even though it's a translation from the Middle English, they tried to very much stay true to the poetic traditions. It does not have the caesura as we know it. It is not nearly as metaphorical. Remember all the keenings and the kinhintes that we had in the other one that were very metaphorical? It's not nearly that, but it's going to be very invested in decoration, in colors and their meanings, in numbers and their significances. So that's very medieval tradition. Yes?
Who's the audience for this? Who's it meant to be?
This is going to be entertainment at court. It's going to be entertainment at a noble's household. It is going to be read by nobles. Therefore, they're going to be sponsoring it, and it's going to be about the concerns of nobility. Okay, that's what the chivalric code is. The common person is not going to be as concerned with chivalric code because they've never made that, nor is it really that much of a part of their life. Because the chivalric code is really only enforceable between people who are of equal standing or higher standing in a nobility type of thing. This is your promises from nobles to other nobles, not so much your promise to your common person. Okay, they were chattel. Those were your serfs. Yeah. So, and it starts with Aeneid, and his noble warriors, blah, blah, blah. So supposedly the whole founding of the British Isles as they know it was based upon people who were fleeing from Troy. Yeah. So this is not your foundling from Beowulf. This is noble heritage that comes and founds another noble kingdom. Yeah. Very medieval, very different. It's also going to be, as far as this particular poem is concerned, right here, this bottom part of it, part of the Pearl poet's technique, especially for Sir Gawain the Green Knight, this is what we call a bob and wheel. Okay, and that is a very poetic technique that is in medieval literature, but brought to its highest form basically by the Pearl poet. And basically it's the whole idea of this being the wheel of a cart. Say this is a cart and this is your bob and wheel at the bottom of it. And every single one of the stanzas ends with that. Okay, and that's just part of the poetic technique of Sir Gawain the Green Knight. Okay. So then Britain is built by this founding father, bold race bred there, battle happy men, turbulent times, blah, blah, blah. And finally, it's going to get you to King Arthur, the highest of this Arthurian legend. And it's going to be set where? Camelot, because we have to have a supernatural place. Remember, it has to be magic, etc. Because this is a chivalric romance. So it's Christmas time. So what colors are we going to be dealing with at Christmas? Green and gold. Very much gold. Okay. So gold is going to be an idea of purity, because to get good, true gold, you have to refine it again and again. You have to burn away those things which are not pure gold. But gold is also incorruptible. What do I mean by that? It doesn't rust. Gold is gold is gold is gold is gold, okay? It doesn't break down. It doesn't tarnish like silver does, okay? And gold has it even has medicinal properties. It's a great conductor. It's very easy to plate things with gold and to make them worth even more, okay? So at this point, it's Christmas time. King Arthur, with the great and the good of the land, had gathered the right noble lords of the ranks of the round table, all roundly carousing, reveling in pleasure. Is this Beowulf? Oh, here's Heorot. Okay. Oh no, it's Smoky Mead Hall. We got this monster coming in. Okay, so how does an Arthurian legend begin? We're carousing, and it's Christmas time. It's revelry, and it sounds like a Dr. Seuss setting. Okay, it's Whoville. So you're feasting. It lasted a full fortnight in one day. So you have how long? What's a fortnight? 14 days, okay? So this is your traditional Yuletide time. They still have that tradition. It's not something we brought with us. Our Christmas is more based upon a German tradition of Christmas than it is an English tradition of Christmas at all. In fact, the second largest, most spoken language in the U.S. until the 1940s was German. Okay. And we know what happened in the 1940s and no one would speak German again. World War II. Okay. Everybody's like, I don't know German. So we lost the language. So there's a hubbub of their humor was heavenly to hear, pleasant dialogue by day and dancing after dusk. So house and hall were lit with happiness, and lords and ladies were luminous with joy. This is exactly the 12 Days of Christmas, that song. Okay, the Lords a leaping. This is it right here. Okay, and it's Christian, and it's Christmas time, and that's why they're celebrating this, and that's why it's called Christmas or Christmas. It's based upon the day of Christ's Mass. That's where the term comes from. Okay. So, and all these fair folks and their age together in that hall. If you see, has anyone seen Harry Potter? When they do the big celebration of Christmas, this is very medieval. Absolutely. The whole Yuletide, the tree being drug in, the whole thing. Except there's a kink to this, because there's a medieval color that we don't understand very well anymore. And what is the medieval color of death? It's green. Okay, because Christmas is a celebration also of the winter equinox, because you have the death of the old and the resurgent, the red, of the new time. That was what the original green and red really symbolized. Yes.
So the red represents equinox and the green represents death?
Red equinox, new life. That's new times, resurgence, etc. And green is your old, that's why we call them evergreen trees. They don't really die, but they do go into stasis. Anyone know anything about deciduous stuff? So they're cheering, and in the midst of this, and Arthur is young, and the food is great, and everyone's brimming with ebullience, okay, great excitement. And there's all kinds of Christmas games, and the nephews of the king are there. And at the head of the board sat Bishop Baldwin. You got your church in the right place, right beside the king. And they're all sitting there, and a guest, and they all have wine and beer, and they go into this whole long explanation of different food that you're eating. And on the subject of supper, I'll say no more. Because a new sound suddenly drew near, which might signal the king to sample his supper, for barely had the horns finished blowing their breath, and starters just spooned the seated guests, a fearful form appeared framed in the door, a mountain of a man, immeasurably high, a hulk of a human, from head to hips, so long and thick in his loins and his limbs, I should generally judge him to be half a giant, or a most massive man, the mightiest of mortals. Okay, now we have this interruption to the feasting. So is this part of the games? Is this a challenge? Nobody knows yet. It's Christmas. It could be a Christmas game for all they know. Okay, but it does start with your iconic medieval description. In an iconic medieval description, you start with the head and you go down the body and you give this whole description of the form, which Chaucer eventually makes fun of beautifully in The Nun's Priest's Tale when he introduces his main character, whose name is Chanticleer. It's a rooster. But he goes through the beautiful medieval tradition of how to present a rooster as if he were a knight walking in. Okay. Part of his satire. So he comes in, and I'll generally judge him half a giant, and he was handsome too, like any horseman with his horse. Okay, and he's got a bulk and brawn of his body. His stomach and waist are slender. In fact, all his features were finely formed. It seemed amazement seized their mind because he's so, well formed. Except, what are they really amazed by? Now we get to it. He's entirely what? Emerald green. Okay, not just green, but emerald green, like shining, like your Christmas decoration. And his gear and garments were green as well. A tight-fitting tunic tailored to his torso and a cloak to cover him. The cloth, he's got white ermine. Okay, anyone know anything about white ermine? Okay, it is only worn by the highest of nobility. And he has a shawl, he has his leggings, they're green, he has spurs, so he's obviously a knight because you couldn't wear spurs unless you were knighted. They were green, gold, strapped with stripy silk, and set on stomachs for a stranger was shoeless. Kind of weird, he's wearing spurs but shoeless. So these are mixed signals they're getting. Is he decoration or is he something we should take seriously? And embroidered with butterflies and birds. So how scary is this? Green beard emblazoned on the background of gold. All the horse's tack was gold and green, and even the horse was green. Oh, look at that. Okay? And he can ride. He's a big horse. The felon green was in fine fettle. The hair on his head was as green as his horse, fine flowing locks which ran across his back, plus a bushy green beard growing down to his breast. Yes?
What would the reaction be to this if this wasn't just a tale? Would they just flip out, or would this be
did you read it? It tells you their reaction. Okay. Because they don't know how to react yet, because they don't know if this is just part of the entertainment or if it's an actual whatever it is. And that's part of what Fit 1 sets up for you. Oh yeah, and he's sending mixed signals because in one hand he has a what? Now he doesn't have a helmet or a halberd on, which would mean I'm totally dressed for war because I've got my helmet and my face mask on. But he does, there's no sword, no shield, but in one hand he has a sprig of holly. I'm a walking Christmas tree. And in the other hand he has a axe. Not just any axe. How big is this axe? The head of this axe is almost 4 feet. So for anyone who's handled an axe, how long would the shaft have to be? 3 to 4 times longer. So the handle of this axe would be about 12 feet long. Is this a little guy? No, Hagrid walked in, dressed as a Christmas tree. There you go. And the handle. So we still don't know because he's got a sprig of holly, which is a total Christmas decoration. Holly is supposed to be a simple piece. That's what it's for. But on the other hand, he has a gigantic axe that has a 4-foot, very sharp blade. What do we do with this guy? And there's a lace, and it's covered with this. Yes?
I've heard this word before, and somebody I once heard brought up how the axe is more of a pagan Anglo-Saxon weapon.
It is very pagan, very Anglo-Saxon. It's not considered to be a weapon of a gentleman. Does that make sense? It's not a weapon of court. It's not a weapon that most knights, because they're going to be doing other types of weapons. It's considered to be a multi-use tool and not a weapon of honor. Does that make sense? So you've got honor and dishonor side by side again, which again, of course, balances it all out because that's what they have to do. It's medieval. And you're right. It is a weapon of a former generation. It's a weapon of another time. And then there's this beautiful hue, and no one knows what to do. So finally, the king acknowledges this curious occurrence and cordially addresses him. Well, and welcome, sir, this winter's night. So they still don't know if the king's just playing along, like it's part of his game. And so, my name is Arthur. I'm head of the house. Won't you slide from the saddle and stay a while? Well, and the business which brings you, we shall learn by. Knight says no. By him and highest heaven, I'm here not to idle in your hall this evening, but because your acclaim is so loudly chorused in your castle and brotherhood are called the best, the strongest men to ever mount the saddle, the worthiest knights ever known to the world, both in competition and true combat. And since courtesy is so sad, is championed here, I'm intrigued and attracted to you at this time. Be sure by this holly stem here in my hand that I mean no menace, so expect no malice, for if I'd slogged here tonight to slay and slaughter, my helmet and halberd wouldn't be at home. He's like, if I was coming in to slaughter you people, I wouldn't leave my stuff at home, okay? So this is Grendel, not Grendel. We'll see. I'm clothed for this, but if you're as honorable as you heard, how about we play a game? So what's the game he proposes? King's like, well, okay, we'll provide you with a fair, unarmored fight. And I'm spoiling for no scrap, I swear. Besides, the bodies on the bench are just bum-fluffed barns. Okay, so what's he call all the knights sitting around Arthur? Soft babies. That's what he just called them. Okay, so does this sound like a serious threat or not? Don't know yet. Okay, he said, you know what? I'll give him a gift of this cleaver, and the axe shall be his to handle how he likes. I'll kneel here. So what he's proposing is the trading of blows. I'll give him his gift, this gigantic cleaver. Axe shall be his to handle how he likes. I'll kneel, bare my neck, and take the first knock. So who has the gall, the gumption, the guts? He'll spring from his seat and snatch this weapon. I offer the axe. Who'll have it as his own? I'll forward one free hit from which I won't flinch and promise that 12 months will pass in peace. Then claim the duty I deserve in 1 year and 1 day. Does no one have the nerve to wager in this way? Okay, so he's proposing a fun game with lethal consequences and using legal terms for the game's promises. When he says claim, duty, and gives an exact time of forfeiture, All of these things are legal terms. So what do we do with this guy now? Is he a walking Christmas tree decoration yet? It flustered at first, now totally foxed for the household and the lords. But the highborn were like, okay, is this like really part? Who's going to step up? Still stirred the knight, swiveled around in saddle, looking left to right, his red eyes rolling beneath the bristles of his bushy green brows. Oh yeah, we forgot to mention that he had red eyes. And now they bring in this. Okay, so he is kind of like a walking Christmas tree. So he's like, here's the house of Arthur, whose virtues reverberate across vast realms. Where's the fortitude and fearlessness you're so famous for, and the breathtaking bravery and the big mouth bragging? The towering reputation of this round table, skittled and scuppered by a stranger? What a scandal. You flap and you flinch, and I've not raised a finger. He laughed so loud that the leader saw red. Blood flowed. So guess who's about to jump up and say, I'll do it? You'll see. He says your request is insane. And Folly finds the man who flirts with the fool. No warrior worth a shot would be worried by your words. So in heaven's good name, hand over the axe and I'll happily fulfill the favor you ask. He's like, fine, I'll do it. All right. Please finish it. Find out what happens.